What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and today I'm joined by a special guest. I'm joined by Rhea Corrigan. How you doing, Rhea? You okay?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, I am going to be annoying and say it's Carrigan.
Carrigan, I apologise.
Yeah, but don't worry, everybody gets it wrong because it's a made-up name, so that's why. My boss at work still calls me Corrigan.
Okay. I won't be that, but Carrigan, I will keep it at that. To be fair, all names are made up. Let's be fair.
Well, that's very true.
Yeah. Rhea, you've joined me today for Now That's What I Call, and this time we're going to be talking about slasher films. It's Halloween.
Yes.
We're getting a real dirge up. The retro nostalgia is kicking in. We've got Halloween Kills coming out. I'm going to see it on Friday. Boom.
Oh, are you nice?
By the time this comes out, I'll have already seen it. We've got Chucky, the new TV series on Sci-Fi coming out, I think starting again on the 15th. We're recording this. On the 12th, sorry, and this starts on the 13th. And next year, in January, I think it might be January 14th, we've got Scream, although it's Scream 5, just Scream. The trailer dropped again today. It's 12th of October. The trailer dropped today. So slasher films are sort of making their way back. So let's talk about slasher films. Let's talk about slashers.
Love it.
First things first, let's go back to the very beginning. Let's go all the way back to those hallowed days. What are your thoughts on where do slashers come from?
Well, so this is a question I was going to ask you, which is, do you believe that Psycho is the first slasher film?
It's interesting. I think 1960 is the start.
Yeah.
But I think Psycho is accompanied by Peeping Tom.
Yes. Which is a film I hate, which I know is terrible as a horror fan. I hate Peeping Tom. Hate strong. I don't like it.
Yeah, it's not a fun watch.
No. You don't go, oh, I'm gonna have a beer and watch Peeping Tom.
Yeah. Of the two, I'd rather watch Psycho.
Yeah, agreed.
I think Peeping Tom's homework. There's a reason that people don't know what Peeping Tom is.
That's true.
For listeners, should we give a quick because everyone knows what Psycho is. 1960, and Alfred Hitchcock, Norman Bates, The Bates Motel, all that sort of thing. Psycho is an American film, British director. Peeping Tom's a British film.
It is, yes.
And it's about a photographer. It's been years since I watched it. I know I've watched it.
I was really dreading that you're going to be like, Rhea, you wrap it up. And I was like, I've not watched it since I was about 18 because I think it's rubbish.
He's a photographer that basically stalks women and utilizes that to kill women. It's akin to like Maniac in some respects, which is obviously a much more graphic film from the 70s. Or the early 80s. But that's where I think it sort of starts.
I think so. I think that's fair enough. And I think that the 60s really started with the idea of the slasher or the lone killer and sort of a woman surviving, sort of like the final girl trope. But I think it didn't come into what I consider like more pure, although I hate that term in horror, like pure slasher films and or genre, which is really the 70s, which I think people had a lot more fun with. I think it's a lot more serious in the 60s, and then we move into the 70s, and obviously it helps with Halloween and Wes Craven and all of these sort of things. That's always gonna there's always going to be John Carpenter and then Wes Craven coming on a bit later. That there's always going to be fun in there, right? Because they are fun directors and filmmakers. But I think the more slasher in its purest term is probably 70s, 80s. And then obviously we get to the Scream era where we again start having a lot more fun with it.
Yeah. One of the things, and this is something, again, I haven't really done masters of research on these things, but I was actually researching something else. This was actually for a thing about monsters. But one of the things I found interesting, the term serial killer and the sort of the associated psychosis that goes with it wasn't established until like the mid 70s. I think it was like 74 or
Really?
75. Yeah. If you've seen there's a program on Netflix called Mindhunter.
Yes, great program.
Yeah, and that's based on the fact, like the
Yes,
guys,
yeah.
the guys that did that sort of like, you know, they interviewed all these killers and termed the phrase serial killer, and then built this sort of profile, this model up for these characters. And I want in my head, is there a correlation between certain things? Like, there are milestones that in America that seem to have rocked the nation, and one of them is the Manson murders, sort of like 1969. Really put a stop to like the hippie movement and sort of enter, you know, you get into the gritty 70s, and that's a big part of it. But also post that you get the recognition of serial killers, and at the back of it you start to get slasher films, you know, like, early ones like Black Christmas, Halloween, and all these things, and all the killers, there's no fun in them, is there? There's no camp, to begin with. And I don't know, I just find that quite interesting that the 70s weren't campy yet when it came to these sorts of characters.
And I guess sort of, I think there is something there, and I'm not great at this sort of stuff, mostly because things just fall out of my brain. But, you know, I think there's definitely, you know, we see it with Romero's zombie films, don't we? You know, that they're off the back of things that are happening in America, political movements, the way society's changing in America. And I wonder if slasher films are the same sort of thing. So what was happening in the 60s and 70s? So got the hippie movement, women, feminism, slasher movie, it's always a woman being stalked by a man. And, you know, if she's not a virgin, she gets murdered. If she is a virgin, she survives. So there's going to be somebody who'll know this much more knowledgeably about me, or maybe you as well, and will say that, yes, that's exactly what it's about. But there's got to be some sort of connection there, hasn't there? That
Yeah, you make a really good point, especially that thing around feminism, because weirdly, slasher films get this sort of, and don't get me wrong, this thing exists, but there's this sort of like cliche or trope that people often talk about. Oh, the bimbo that's just running around with the boobs out getting hunted, you know. Yeah, but that's like one of the, you know, maybe one of the characters. There's always, you know, and excuse the terminology, but there's one slutty character. But there's always the virginal, intelligent one, the Laurie Strode or the Heather Langen, you know, the Nancy Thompson, those sorts of things. You always get the final girl. That's been the sort of the. But you're right in that it's this sort of weird thing about sexual promiscuity, though, isn't it? Out of the 60s of sort of like free love, and you're like, yeah, well, now free love and the use of drugs results in Jason Voorhees coming to cut your head off. We want to go back to those conservative 50s values of no premarital sex and, you know, those you know, women that are women, that sort of thing. Just saying that reminds me, I don't know if you've remember Harry Enfield. Women know your place.
Yes, God, Harry, that's it. We must be the same age.
Yes.
Because I was like, that is very much my generation reference. But, you know, that, and it must be because, you know, it's, especially when we get to the 80s. So who was the president in the 80s? Reagan? God, this is terrible. I'm so sorry.
Reagan comes in, yeah. So there's a couple of things actually, and you're I think Reagan's 81. Reagan gets elected in 81, and in this country, obviously accompanied by Thatcher, who was elected in 78. So you get a conservative 80s, very conservative 80s.
Yeah. You know, so it's I think so. For me, I love horror films, and one of the things I love about horror films is it's usually a space where there gets to be female characters, whether it's they're the bimbo or the final girl or like the token woman of color or anything like that. You know, all of those tropes suck, but at least women get to be the main characters, even though they're being stalked and murdered, or like their husband doesn't believe their house is haunted. Because I mean, what is wrong with men? I know it's not what we're talking about, but in like haunted house, poltergeisty things, they never believe the woman who's like, yeah, this creepy thing happened. They're like, no, it didn't. No,
I hate that trope. I agree. It's one of the most frustrating and annoying tropes in ghost films, or even like possession films. They're like, you know, it could, I think this is this. I think it's a ghost. I think it's a possession. And you get the sort of, it's again, it comes back to feminism and this conservative notion of, oh, it's just being the flighty woman, and spiritualism and feminism and man being logical. It's ridiculous and it's so frustrating. But yes, you.
But so there's got to be something in there where it is, I think it's probably more likely that filmmakers are pushing back against that conservatism and saying, these are even though, with slasher films, the virgin survives and all of those sort of things, but it's sort of like, these are the tropes that conservatives want to see, right? They want to see women in the homes, but actually this woman has to fight to survive. And hey, women have to do that all the time, every single day. Not going to go on that rant. But, it's, and the woman or the girl always survives at the end, right? It's very rarely that she doesn't.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's always, until the next film, when they usually kill them off so they can have a new final girl. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'm thinking in my head, we'll move on from the political allegory, I swear. But one thing I think in my head, it's one of those weird ones where you do, and I know that people sort of badge it with the morality tale that sex and drugs in a slasher film equals death. And you go, oh no, you can't have sex and drugs in a slasher film. We'll go, all right, well, is it actually a morality tale? Or is it actually, let's say, a pushback where these progressive free love, and actually when you see these characters that do get killed, they are the sort of like more relaxed and sort of progressive and open characters, are being killed off by a conservative killer. So actually the baddie is conservatism.
Yes,
so,
I'm down with this.
Yeah, so horror films, yes, the final girl is often you would say the virginal one, the sort of the straight-laced one, if you want to use that term. For the most part, I think there are sort of some variances to that. But actually, she survives because of her conservatism, because she's, but still, in often cases, as you say, it's when she stands up for herself and becomes an independent, it's going to sound so fucking patronizing, so I apologize, but becomes an independent woman, that she's actually had to stand up to these conservative ideals and fight back. An example has just come into my head, and I can't remember the bloody character's name, but the post Nancy in the Friday and the Nightmare on Elm Street films, 4 and 5 has got a character in it, Dream Child. God damn it, Dream Warriors is my favorite, but
yeah, because it's amazing.
Yes, it is. But beyond that, you get a character in, and I'm going to look. If you're looking it up, I'll look it up in a minute.
I'm trying to have a quick look. Yeah.
You get the character who she is the mousy sort of right. This is great podcasting, by the way.
So the Dream Master, we on Dream
Master, that's it. Number 4.
Here we go. It's because there's so many. It's ridiculous.
So you get Alice, there you go. Alice is the best example of this, and she's a fantastic example because she starts off as that very example character. Like, she starts off, she's mousy, she's shy, she's conservative, she's virginal, and it's not until she actually starts to embrace the outgoing traits of her friends that have been killed that she's able to stand up to Freddy. And actually, in a second one as well, in Dream Child, it's again those traits that keep her strong about fighting. And Freddy is definitely a conservative killer.
100%. Yeah.
And so I think we're onto a theory here. I feel a dissertation coming on. But yeah, there's this thing of like for these characters, these female characters, like unshackling themselves from this conservative sort of tropes is what allows them to survive at the end of the film.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in agreement. And I think that's where it can become really disappointing in the sequels, where the final girl, or even like when it's a new final girl, it's not that she doesn't live up to what she did in the original or the first one. It's more that I often feel like the character gets completely thrown out.
Yes.
Like, and we see that with the Halloween films. So I'm rewatching all the Halloween films.
Me too.
Yes. And Halloween 2 is so, I mean, who is Laurie in that film? I did a quick review for Pop Quiz, and I'm like, she literally just flops around in a bed for half of the film.
Yeah, she's
And
in
I'm
like some drug-induced coma for that massive part
it's
of it.
ridiculous. And it's like in the first one, you know, she is sort of, you know, she doesn't have sex and stuff like that, but she knows who she is, right? She's a very strong character. She's got strong beliefs. You know, when it comes to when Michael's attacking them, you know, she's protecting the children, you know, which in itself nowadays is quite tropey because it's the woman must protect the children, but back then wasn't. And you've got to, I think it's important to remember that when it came out, you know. And she's very much like, I am not going to let, she knows something's wrong throughout the whole film. I am not going to let this killer kill me and these children. I am going to survive. And she's really strong. And then you get to like the second film and she's just flopping around in a bed. And then you get to obviously the third one isn't in the same sort of timeline. But then you get to the fourth one, she's just like abandoned her child and so on and so on. And then we finally get to sort of like H2O and the more remakes. And they have to bring her back to being that strong character because they can tell they've just completely lost that way with that strong female character storytelling throughout. And it works. That's why, I mean, because I like H2O.
I do. I love H2O. I think it's a great film.
I think it's great fun.
Yeah. Look, let's talk at Laurie Strode because I think she's an interesting entry point for a lot of this. Because you're right, in the first film, I mean, she's the prototype for this. I mean, and again, we also know that Jamie Lee Curtis was the original Scream Queen. She went on to do all kinds of bits and pieces. Terror Train. Terror Train. It's got Prom Night, which is all right, and then she did one on a train, which I watched and thought was dreadful. But you know, it's all swings and roundabouts. But yeah, Laurie Strode. They don't know what to do with her. And it's clear that this they obviously built themselves into a corner. Firstly, by making her Michael's sister. Spoilers for anyone who didn't know that from 30 years ago, 40 years ago. She becomes this sort of like anchor point for the film, for the series, and they can't get away from it. Like you say, they bring her back for H2O, and she's a much more resilient character. She's got the trauma, but not. Yeah. It's not like a brazen trauma. And then you get Resurrection. And they do exactly the same thing again, where they're like, I get the impulse that they've got to kill her. I understand the need to break that connection between Michael and Laurie. They've got to break that. But the way it's done is such... To steal a Chris Phelps phrase, it's bobbins. It's absolutely...
Yeah. I'm going to make sure I'm remembering correctly. I probably should just Google it instead. She's like knows he's going to return, but she's so worried about killing. Is it because she kills the wrong person previously? So at the end of it, so
spoilers, spoilers for the.
And doesn't he? Oh yeah, sorry. Doesn't he then like? He throws her off something. I want to say
a building.
I think it's because a building. I think it's because you said terror train. I want it to be like a train, but I don't think there's a train in it.
So I literally watched this today because I'm working with the series. So yeah, she locks. And again, it's relatively well done. So in H2O, you know, they think Michael's dead, but she steals the body because she's going to go off and do something with it. He sits up, and then she crashes the van, and he's caught between the van and a tree trunk. And at one point, he reaches for his mask, and he's reaching out. And then she lops his head off. And it turns out that it wasn't Michael, it was one of the police, and Michael had switched over, and they play it out. She's then incarcerated in sort of like a psychiatric unit, and he hunts her there, breaks into the hospital, but she knows he's coming, so she set up a bunch of booby traps, like Home Alone style, but they go a bit pear-shaped, and he stabs her and throws her off a building. And so I'm like, okay, you know, I knew you had to do it this way. To be fair, it's not great. It's still the best part of Resurrection. Doesn't say much. But then they've brought it back now for Halloween 2018.
Yeah.
Do you think this idea that they brought back in 2018, do you feel it's still Laurie? This because she's obviously traumatized and there's all this other stuff, the baggage that goes with it. I don't know.
It's hard because I'm a big fan of Terminator and Terminator 2 and Linda Hamilton's performance and how she goes. I mean, she's still badass in Terminator, but how she becomes massively badass in Terminator 2. So I have a love for the fact that Laurie's like, I'm gonna like I've got this major plan and I know how to use guns and all of these sort of things. So in general, I think that's pretty cool because I like that. But also I do think there's something missing from what Jamie Lee Curtis brings to Laurie Strode in the first film. Like, you know, I know her acting's not amazing in it, although she is an amazing actress. You know, and I know that, you know, when we get to films like Scream, we see Neve Campbell doing, I mean, I think she's outstanding in that film. I think she's absolutely wonderful. So we know that there are young actresses who can do it better, but she brings something so genuine to the role in the first Halloween, and something so authentic. And I know we use that word a lot these days, but I actually think she does. That everything she does feels real. She doesn't do anything that we laugh about in the tropes now from slasher films or horror films. Everything she does is done with a purpose, and you understand why she does it, and it's very natural. And I think as much as I like sort of, you know, her becoming badass, I think that's a troublesome trope when the only way she can be strong is to get muscles and fire guns and punch people and do all of those sort of things. And so it doesn't quite hit right for me.
Yeah, it's, as I said, so I'm working through the series at the moment, ready for Halloween Kills. And one of the things I thought about, I haven't watched 2018 again yet, I'm going to watch it before Friday, but watching H2O, one of the things that sort of struck me was it's supposed to be obviously 20 years later. She's had a kid, so she's obviously got, it only connects to the first two films. So it's like 1, 2, H2O. So you forget all the Jamie ones. And everyone forgets Curse because it's absolutely dreadful. But one of the things I find interesting is that she's become the head of a school. She's clearly successful. And yes, she's had a failed relationship, but it's clearly not entirely her fault. She hasn't driven this other man away.
I mean, and also, who cares? People have failed relationships all the time.
Exactly. And, you know, the only sort of time that they really show, she still has nightmares. She's got a overly protective instinct towards her son, and she's a secret drunk. Like, she's clearly got an alcoholic problem, but that's fine. This thing is hanging over her. But with, like you say, but she's sort of, because you get Sarah Connored up for 2018, it feels a bit like, and that, because that only responds to the first film. So 2018 is a sequel only to the first film. And so I'm like, 40 years later, and you are now sort of determined that, you know, the boogeyman's not going to get you. And I'm like, the one thing I'd say is, again, it comes back to this thing of like, when you watch 78, the original, compared to sort of things that go on today, and this is the problem with the real world today, like, you know, there are knifings, there are shootings, there are mass knifings and stuff going on. And when you watch that first film, you're like, yeah, no, it's a real, it would, for a small town like that, it would be a major event. Would it still be as much as a trauma 40 years on? Like, she finds the bodies, but she doesn't ever actually see anyone killed. And so it feels a little bit overplayed. I agree. Like, you know, the 2018 response to it, like, you know, yeah, she's basically ready. She is prepared for the return of the T-1000 rather than Michael Myers. Absolutely.
And if none of the other films have happened, why is she that prepared?
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
No, it feels like an over response to something.
And if you just wanted to make a film of Jamie Lee Curtis going around kicking a serial killer's butt, then just make that. Don't make it Halloween.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I would happily go and watch that any day of the week. So just make that for me. I will give you all my money, and it'll be amazing.
I agree. That's not to say I don't like 2018, but it does definitely feel a bit like I'm like, nah. The Neve Campbell response, like you say, in Scream, the Sidney Prescott response feels more authentic. We use the word authentic, but more legit. Like, she becomes a crisis counselor because she's obviously gone through it, but she secludes herself. That makes total sense. All right, you're going to separate yourself off, and you're going to sort of become a crisis counselor. And I feel a bit the same with Nancy Thompson in the Freddy films. So she becomes a dream specialist or a sleep specialist, and she takes the medication to stop her dreams. Like, they seem more responsible, maintaining that female strength without being becoming Rambo, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I do think that is one of the things that works well in slasher films, that especially in the more modern ones, that you see women using different types of strengths to survive. So, I hate when people say intelligence is a strength. I mean, it is, but it's so cheesy when people say it. But, using, and again, Scream's a great example, they know the world around them, so they use that to survive. Yeah, sure, they're strong, but they're not super strong. But, it's sort of like, even though Tatum, Rose McGowan character's called Tatum, right, gets killed, she's like, right, I can get out through this flap in the garage door, right?
Yeah.
And it's stuff like that.
Well, let's be fair. Rose McGowan could have got through that flap. I'd have been screwed, to be perfectly
Oh my
honest.
God, me too. Absolutely, me too. I would not. I'm like, this is one of the reasons I have to get fit, because I'm like, one, I want to be able to run away from zombies.
Yeah.
And two, if I am running away from zombies or serial killers or whatever, I need to be able to fit into the smallest spaces, because I can't do that. But it's a different, it's a different type of them understanding their situation and the world around them. It's not just punchy, kicky, shoot a gun. And I think that's why they work better, especially when we see, we see all these sequels to horror films, which I tend to watch them all, although I can't remember, they all meld into one, where it's more about upping the violence or upping things that happen to characters. And actually what's better and what works in the original is often that they are in situations where they're having to use their brains or ingenuity to get out of it. Yeah.
Well, that's where sort of like, despite some of the aging special effects, like the end of A Nightmare on Elm Street works.
Yeah.
Like Nancy forms a plan. She's like, I've got his plan. I was able to bring his hat out, and so I'm going to bring Freddy into the real world, and then I'm going to basically Kevin McAllister his ass, and I don't like the final ending, which is like, I don't believe in you anymore. I think that bit makes no sense. But the fact that she does step up and she's like, no, I'm going to have all this stuff that, I'm going to basically turn the real world against him is great. It's a really good, like solid approach. Like, that's what you would do. Like, no one's going to believe you. You've got to take this on. So you're going to come up with a plan. So
yeah, and it's always them having to do it mostly by themselves, whilst like usually the men in their lives flap around being useless and getting murdered. Like they're like, I'm not going to get murdered because I'm not useless.
Yeah.
And sorry, men. No, not sorry, men. You're just flapping around being useless, trying to touch boobs. And they're like, I'm not gonna. It's almost like they're going, I don't want to end up like them.
Yeah, well, weirdly, that goes on to another point. We'll get into a gender thing again. Is you say about men and women. One of the main reasons there's always characters in these films that like just their like machismo is what gets them killed. There's in every Jason film and every Michael film, there's always that one character that's like come on pussy, I'll take you, and then gets his head lopped off. Like there's always that. Yeah. Like when you go, actually no, run. I would not.
I would do that. I'm sorry. I mean, I would be running slowly. But we've now moved into like a big 4-bedroom house. It's not that big. I'm not showing off. But like it's bigger than a 2-bed flat, which felt very safe on a 3rd floor. There's just a door on the street, which I find weird. People can just walk in. I mean, they don't, but they could really. Obviously, we lock it. I've definitely watched too many horror films. But if I was like in this house alone and it was a bit dark and I heard a weird noise, I wouldn't investigate it. Like if I heard a noise or like something spooky happened, like I had put my phone down and it moved to a different place, I wouldn't just be like, oh, do you know what? I want to go looking for it. I'd be like, I'm getting the fuck out of here. I'm sorry, but something spooky's happening. I would rather people go, you're an idiot, and like nothing's happened, it was just like this normal thing, then just be like, oh, do you know what, I'm going to go around, or shout and be like, oh yeah, come and get me, killer, because what are they going to do? They're going to come and get you. I'm just fucking out the front door. Advertise
your location.
Yeah, like I'm not into that whole being brave scenario. I'm like, I would much rather just live.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. I think you're right, because there's that sort of like, you know, there's a sensible response. And also, like you said, this comes back to what you're saying about sort of, you know, zombie films. One of the things I hate about sort of a lot of modern zombie films is they all seem to exist in a universe where no one knows what a zombie is.
Yeah.
And then so slasher, but this is what Scream did, where they existed in a world where everyone's like, oh no, I've seen slasher films. Like, we know what the rules are, and that's how we'll survive. And you sort of like, you have to acknowledge this meta knowledge. You have to say, yeah, of course we all know how these things work. You know, if you don't, it sort of feels, the characters feel like extra stupid.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, because you're going, well, I know what the rules are. The filmmakers clearly know what the rules are because they're making the film.
Yeah.
But they're not acknowledging the rules. And it's sort of like, you know, and that's clearly where Kevin Williamson came from when he was writing Scream. But yeah, no, let's we've been talking about the victims because there's a transitional point and that I want to get to. But let's talk about the killers in more detail. So we've talked about Michael Myers. We've mentioned sort of him quite a lot, and we've obviously mentioned Freddy. I'm going to throw an idea out, and that's a thing. But I think there are two. Well, there are two. I think there's sort of 2 or 3 camps for these things. That, and I feel that all horror films sort of move. A lot of them move from one to the other. They either start as a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Circa sort of Friday the 13th, Sleepaway Camp, Prom Night, those sorts of things where you don't really know who the killer is. You know, Valentine, Urban Legend, those sorts of ones. Yeah. You know, I Know What You Did Last.
2 great films you just shouted out.
I Know What You Did Last Summer. Those ones where it's sort of like, you know, and even Scream. You know, those ones where it's a mystery.
Yeah.
And then the killer is revealed. Now, always in those cases, the killer is human. Now, and there was a justification for the killing. And in those cases, the film ends. Or in many of those cases, the franchise sort of has to end. Or they introduce a new killer. So like with Scream, it becomes the same. The costume becomes the key factor.
Yeah.
And like Sleepaway Camp did something very different. Same with Urban Legend. It became a different group of people each time. It was all about different things. That's one way of going. You know, Nev Campbell is the key sort of. Nev Campbell in the costume becomes the key factor. Others, so let's go Friday the 13th, sort of went, yeah, we're going to completely drop the mother angle because firstly she was too old, and I although I like that first film, how she beat sort of like some young men and then hung them on some doors and stuff with bows and arrows baffles me. But and they introduced Jason, and Jason starts as a human character, and Michael starts as a human character, but they all end up becoming supernatural. If you're going to stick with a killer, they end up becoming supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
And don't tell me that Michael Myers isn't supernatural. I'll argue that that's a hill I will die on. Like,
he's definitely supernatural.
Yeah, and I in my own head canon, I have a complete story, but you know that's a different thing. I don't know what you thought about this. This idea of or they start supernatural and they've clocked it and gone. In this franchise, we need them to have a way of coming back, so they need to be supernatural. So Freddy or Chucky or even like Wishmaster or one of those other ones where sort of like, you know, they're able to come back. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I sort of hate the supernatural angle, but then so I don't like that, you know, they're human and they can't be killed, but it's all to make them come back. But then I do think it makes it really fun. And I think that's one of the things, like, because I like I said, I watch a lot of horror films and I can pull them apart all day long, but I sort of don't want to because they are ridiculously fun. I mean, many sequels are terrible, but I will sit and watch them. And I think the supernatural element of the killers, of, you know, of Michael the Shape or Freddy or Jason, etc., I do think it brings an element of fun, although it makes them a lot less scary because you know exactly what's going to happen, and you know that they might kill off this lot, but it doesn't really matter because there'll be more for them to kill off anyway. So you know that everybody else is dispensable and they're not. Yeah, I don't know. So it's one of those things that irritates me. I'm like, oh, why do they have to be supernatural? Because I hate the whole, what is now a trope, of course, of you kill the killer and then they're not dead. They come up for one last scare type thing. I hate it because you know it's going to happen. But at the same time, I think if it's not there, you would be disappointed.
Yeah, exactly. And
you can't make me happy, clearly.
No. Yeah, can't win for want of trying. And again, I think Chucky actually, if you watch it in Bride of Chucky, he nailed that where they're about to kill him at the end. And he says like, he says, you can't, he says, I know what happens. You're going to kill me. Yeah, but I'll be back. But dying is such a bitch. Like he knows, like they completely know in that film. And I do think the transition I was thinking of, I wanted to mention, and it happens in a lot, and especially when it comes to the supernatural ones, is there is a point where you stop supporting the victims and you vicariously, you may not want to acknowledge it, but you vicariously start supporting the slasher killer. And
totally.
And trigger warning for anyone listening to this. I'm not advocating sort of murder and mayhem. However, the later Jason Friday the 13th films, the later Michael Myers, even the Michael Myers, the later Freddy films, like you are not supporting the cast, as you said. They are there to be characters or to be killed. You're there for how Freddy's going to do it. Yeah, you're there for how Jason's going to, do it. That's more the point. Chucky is a really good example where, like, they like with Bride of Chucky, they realized that they're like, oh no, we know this is fun and we want to see them. We want to see the killing. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
So let's make it inventive rather than, oh my God, I want to feel the tension of a thriller. I'm here for the fun of the gore.
Yeah, and I do think that's where slasher films started to change, isn't it? That it wasn't about the classic horror of tension and release, tension and release, tension, release. Yeah. It didn't become that. It moved on from that. Whether that's good or bad, depends what day I'm on. If it's I want to watch somebody go around killing loads of people, then great. If it's I want something that's actually quite terrifying and gives me that tension, that adrenaline release, then I don't want it. And I think it's funny that you're talking about Chucky, because I hate the Chucky films because they genuinely terrify me. Not because they're bad. I mean, and some of them are, and I've watched as many as I possibly can, but I can never watch them in full. I have to watch them half and half. I can do it in broad. I don't really get scared by anything because I've got two older brothers who they watched horror films around me when I was very young, so I've sort of watched lots of stuff I shouldn't have done. I don't find things particularly scary, but I don't like anything with dolls. I don't like that at all. And so Chucky for me is genius horror, and that's very personal because I find Chucky brilliant, and I find what they do with it, especially later on when they get so self-knowing, so self-referential, and I really enjoy that. But I cannot watch them because I find him absolutely terrifying.
No, I will admit something. So, I saw the first Chucky film came out in 1988. Child's Play, the first Child's Play film, and I'm a massive fan of the Child's Play films. I absolutely love them. I love Chucky. It's probably one of my favorites. But that first film is, again, it comes to this mystery thing. It becomes there is the mystery element to it. Again, it has the supernatural. Well, it starts with the supernatural. I mean, it opens with a voodoo ceremony, for God's sake.
But the supernatural works in those films. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
but I feel like that's where those films get better with age and as they go along, even when their sequels are terrible, because everything from that first film's so knowing.
Yes,
but not in a disrespectful to the film or the audience way. It just knows what it's doing as a film and it embraces that. And I feel like that carries on through the rest of them because it's got such a good blueprint for the rest of them. Sorry to interrupt you, Carrie.
No, you're right, and I totally agree. And I think that's exactly what it is. I mean, with Chucky in particular, like they can have all kinds of fun. Like they know the thing is that Don Mancini, the guy who wrote it, like originally he wanted it to be taken serious. Like he was all about doing this serious thing. It was going to be a comment on commercialism and this idea, this idea of the fad toy at Christmas. It was going to be a comment on that. And then as they did it, they were like, do you know what? It's a doll chasing a kid. Like, it's a bit, there is a campness to it. And so they lent into that. And I'm so glad they did. I mean, again, and it helps when you've got like Brad Dourif, who clearly knows what film he's in, and gives Chucky an absolute charm and charisma.
Yeah. That's why so creepy.
Oh yeah. But I mean, I don't want to go like and that scene. But there's a scene in Chucky when like he's going after Andy Berkeley, and he's going up the lift in the elevator. He's been kicked about. He's got a cigarette burn on his face. And all that kind of stuff. And he's sat in the lift doing his Toy Story bit, pretending to be a toy. And there's an older couple in the lift. And as they get out, the woman looks back and goes, "Ugly doll." And you just hear this voice go, "Fuck you." And it's just, there's little gags in it that are just really good. But the moment I watched it very young, I think I remember watching 1 when 2 came out.
Oh, wow.
I remember seeing it when I think 2 came out in 1990, remember around that time. And I watched it on video, and again, as you say, I didn't have older brothers, but I had a friend who had older brothers, and they were like, "Of course you can watch this video. That's you're clearly too young for." And I watched that, and the bit that I love now is the whole scene when she sees the batteries. And the thing that bothers me most as well is the mum in Child's Play is also the mum in Goonies. And it is. So I've seen all these other things. I'm like, hang on, I don't like this. But she finds out the batteries he doesn't have any batteries in, and the head spins around. And he says some, "Hi, I'm Chucky. Want to play?" And she drops him under the sofa. And then she pulls him out, and she's like, she starts shaking him, and she's like, "Come on, talk, damn it." And he just goes, Chucky goes mental at her, starts kicking. He's like, "Fuck you," railing at her. And when I was a kid, like I was like 10 watching this thing.
Oh my God.
And me and my friends up there, "Oh, don't like this. Like proper freaked me out and stuck with me for ages. But it, like you say, it works. And I think it obviously works because the special effects are great.
Yeah, it's so good.
So practical special effects. I can't remember the guy's name, and I'm really sorry, but when I first started doing 20th Century Geek, I interviewed the guy who was in the Chucky outfit.
No.
Yeah, he played Howard. He played Howard the Duck as well, so I got to talk to him.
God, that is amazing.
But you're right, like Chucky works because it knows it's camp. But yeah, we'll get into Chucky because obviously there's something else I want to mention. We'll talk to, but again, like Freddy's the same. You want me
to be more terrified? Why mean?
We'll get back to. Well, let's get to it now then, actually, because Child's Play has an interesting history, and I am going to be talking a bit about this on the Patreon. But Child's Play 3.
Oh, okay. Child's Play 3. I've
Child's
probably
Play 3.
seen it. You're gonna have to remind me of the plot.
Okay, well, Child's Play 3. This is outside of the film. I don't know if you remember this because you and I are about the same age. So Child's Play 3, released in 92, 93, was released when he goes to army camp. So Andy Berkeley goes to army camp or an army school, military school, played by the kid who was in Lois and Clark. But Chucky follows him there, and it has all this stuff, and it ends with Chucky being thrown onto a fairground ride, has his face chopped off, and all sorts of stuff. And that results in obviously the fucked up disfigurements that happen for Bride of Chucky. However, it was very closely linked with the tragic killing of Jamie Bulger.
Yes. And
I remember the absolute outrage at the time and all the sort of press of it was banned. It was banned in the UK for about a year. Ban it. All these films need to be banned. Who'll think of the children and all that stuff? And you say about the real killers, the real people and stuff like that. Do you ever think that there's a responsibility that if it's too real, it's a bit too close to the bone? Or
so I think it depends. So I'm not sure this is the space to talk about the James Bulger murder, but I don't believe that media can, I think if you are already that way inclined, you're going to use media as an excuse for the reason that you did things. But I do think, so I have issues around, so you talked about earlier, the Manson murders. There's a whole raft of films that come out which I think are really exploitative. I think especially, there's one called Wolves at the Door and things like that. And it's actually something I dislike about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I hate that it's a story about a woman, but the woman's not centered. It's about all the men around her. And I actually find it quite offensive.
Yeah, just to be clear, that's just a Tarantino film.
Yes, I mean, yes, obviously. But I think, he made so much of it, and they make so much of it about how Sharon Tate's in it. It's about Sharon Tate. And then they have her in there and she says about 3 lines and that's about it. Yeah. And it's about these men who just randomly happen to save her, right?
Yeah. To clarify, that's exactly what I mean by when I say a Tarantino film. I know it's a Tarantino film, but my point being every Tarantino film seems to have a female character that should be more central, but has a male cast around her. Yeah,
considering he's a man who says he loves women, maybe just center them occasionally.
Just their feet. I think he just likes their feet. Yeah. Very
so I do find things like that. I think there is a responsibility in telling stories, in telling them in a particular way, and I don't think that means that everything needs to be true to life or anything like that. But I think there needs to be a sensible person who goes, this is not appropriate, and I don't believe in sort of what maybe right-wing people would say is censorship. I don't believe in that, but I do think there needs to be guidance and responsibility on, what is available for people. Now, I've watched a lot of horror films, as we've talked about, and I watched them far too young. I don't feel like it's had any negative effects on me, and I actually think it's fantastic because I think they're brilliant. But I would do because I've seen them lots. But also I think, when I was watching horror films, when I was young, they weren't to the extreme as they are now. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with horror films. It's been how extreme can we go? And that's why I really like this new raft of filmmakers that are coming in, and it's about telling actual stories. I'm talking about Ari Aster, and we've got films like The Babadook and Roar and The Witch. I can't remember the guy who did The Witch and all of those ones, sorry. I think that they understand horror and how it's not about lots of, although I like gore and stuff like that, it's not always about all of that, which I think there's a real area in the 2000s where we forgot that as a society, and it was all just about stabbing people. So back to your original question. I said I wasn't going to do that. But I think I'm a big fan of the rating system that we have in the UK. I don't really know much about it in America, but I think that's a sensible thing to have. And I feel like I'm a parent, and I feel like it's my responsibility to not adhere to it, but be okay, so this is, she's only 3, so she's not going to be watching them, but this is a 15. Do I want my 12-year-old to watch a 15? Yeah. Great example is my I guess she's my niece because it's my husband's niece. She loves horror films, so it's just been fantastic. She's just turned 16, so we were talking about stuff, and she was watching ones which I didn't think were particularly appropriate for her age, but I wouldn't tell her not to watch it. But I was like, okay, if you like that sort of thing, I think this is probably more in the direction that you might like, sort of that sort of
you Kenobi'd her.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, let's say that. I like that. And I think that's important, but I also think it's important that when you watch any type of media, whether it's horror films or not, you talk about it. And I think that, I was very, very lucky as a child because my brother's just a couple of years older than me, and we both love films. So we'd watch them together and we'd talk about them. And I think that can take away a lot of the word trauma is not the right word, but you're talking through it, you're talking about the things that are happening, you're discussing them, you're saying, oh, this is scary because of that, or that didn't scare me, oh, but that scared you, or I found that funny and that not funny, because it's the conversations that help make film in general more interesting, but I think they help
Yes.
make horror films more interesting and also less scary or more scary. You know, I
Yes.
love watching a horror film with somebody and something will be happening in the background that either I've not noticed or they've not noticed, and we'll talk about it afterwards. And then next time I go back to watch it and I'll see it and I'll be like, oh my fucking God, that's so scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think I can't even remember my original point. I've gotten too excited. But I think it's important that there's guidance, but I don't necessarily 100% agree with censorship. Oh my God,
No,
that's the most middle of the fence answer. that you've
No,
ever
I
had.
agree. No, it's yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things, no, I actually completely agree. And I actually agree. I think we've reached a better ground in this country with regards to censorship. Like they don't cut as much out of films as they used to. You know, when we were kids, I know that The Exorcist was banned and
Yeah.
Evil Dead, the first Evil Dead we had the video nasties, and I've covered all this in the past. You know, all these films that were banned, and you know, as a video rental store or anybody, if you were found trading in those, you could be prosecuted and you would be doing time. So that sort of thing is way too much. You know, like
Yes, yeah.
yeah, the fact
Especially adults, we shouldn't be holding adults' hands. They should be able to make these decisions
Exactly.
for themselves.
you know, if someone of our age or 18 and above wants to watch Zombie Holocaust, fine, go for it. I've got no problem with that. You know, it's a film that was created. What I do think is, let's say, what's better now, I'm looking to see if there's a DVD or anything around me that's got it on, but you have on the back now, a lot of them will say, like, you know, violence, sex and nudity, language, and it will say, like, you know, intense or whatever. So you can sort of go, okay, it's a 15 or it's an 18, but you know, it might have, like, you know, if it was to say basically sort of like, you know, minimal violence, but then like extreme sex and nudity, I'd be like, yeah, that's probably not something we're going to share at this point because I don't want that conversation with my sort of like some 16-year-old child. But there's other ones where you go, I've seen it, I know it's an 18,
Yes.
but I know that it's probably, you know, like a good example would be like, you know, Poltergeist is I believe is a 15, you know, but that's genuine. That's more about the horror. There's no sex, no violence. It's proper scary. Great, let's watch that. You know, and again, you can talk about it afterwards. And I believe there's the ones that I actually really like, American Werewolf in London. You know,
I mean, yeah, it's amazing.
yeah. And if you to go from for the slasher films again, I think, you know, like say, I would happily introduce. I'm going to double check. Is it an 18? Yeah, Halloween 1 is an 18.
Is it?
Yeah,
that's interesting. I wonder why it's an
exactly.
18.
I don't know, but it's down as an 18. But I would have no problem showing that to a 15-year-old.
Mm.
Where I'd be like, yeah, there's, you know, especially a 15-year-old boy, but look, there's a couple of boobs in this, right? So control yourself. Like, it's not like, yeah, I think the difference it comes to is like, it's not exploitative.
Yes.
And that's where I'll sort of start to draw the line, where I'll be like, you know, yeah, I'm not going to show you any sort of like, I'm probably not going to show you Saw at this point, but I'm quite happy with you watching, as you say, like Friday the 13th, part 4, Friday the 13th 3D, because it's ridiculous, you know, or Nightmare on Elm Street 3 because it's awesome. But you're right about censorship. We have I think we have quite a, you know, you can have that approach. It's about sensible things. But I also agree with what you're saying about the types of horror. I think I'm more willing to show camp horror to someone younger than I am straight up horror.
Yes.
For example, like you mentioned like Hereditary, or let's say Midsommar, or some of those kinds of films, those A24 kind of films, you know, like, I think they're fantastic. Like, I'm a big fan of those kinds of horrors. And yet I would be reluctant to show them to someone of a certain age. Like, you know, if it's an 18, like Hereditary, I believe is an 18. Like,
yes.
But yeah, I think you need to have a certain level of maturity, not just to go, it's not gory, it's got a level of intensity.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff that goes on is, you know, again, spoilers for this, but like Toni Collette's response to when her daughter dies, and when she sees what happens to her daughter, like, even as a full-grown man, like proper broke me. Like,
Oh my god, you said it and I hear it. I hear it exactly as it is. It's so amazing. And it, with Hereditary as well, I think that's a great example because it's not the horror in Hereditary, it's the themes in Hereditary, right? That are very mature and are very traumatic. And there's, there are grown-ups, adults who you can tell I've got a toddler, they're all grown-ups, that if I knew that they had a particular mental state or anything like that, I would say don't watch it. I would explain my reason why, but I'd be like, I don't think you're in the right place to watch it right now. Because I think that's really important. It's just about that sort of weighing things up, isn't it?
I think it's one of, like I say, if you knew someone had anxiety or a tendency towards an anxious state, I'd be like, just stay away from Midsummer or Hereditary. Like, you're not gonna bode well with those kinds of films because it's you talked before about tension release, or tension release. Like those films are a bit more like tension, 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 and then at the end some release. It's.
Is there any release in Midsummer? Maybe that it's over. I love Midsummer.
Midsummer's amazing. Yeah, Midsummer's
most
amazing.
Favorite films, most recent favorite films, but I think heading into the all-time. But I mean, I was so glad when it was over.
Yeah,
so glad.
But that's one of those films. Again, we're way off slasher films, but it's fun. We'll circle back to it. And again, you talk about this thing with because we'll talk about the types of scares, which I think is important.
Oh yeah.
When you watch something like Midsummer or Hereditary, and I think of The Wicker Man as well. Like The Wicker Man's not a particularly scary film.
Yeah.
But it's one of those films that even when you don't know much about it going into it, there's something, this Wicker Man, it's on the cover, they're not hiding it.
Mm-hmm.
There is this thing in the background. There's you feel it with Midsummer as well. Like, the darkness is going to be revealed soon. Like there's something in the background going on. And this weirdness, again, with Midsummer or even with Wicker Man, where you're just like, what is going on? What is this? And that tension's it's not the same ramping up of tension in the same way. It's just this sort of, as a viewer, you are in the part of the constable in Wicker Man or Pew in
Annie.
Yes, in Midsummer. You're there going like, I don't know what is going on. It feels weird. I don't like it. And you are completely out of control because as a viewer, like you have got you can't control the direction and you're just not there for the ride. And that's what builds that tension when you're like, something's got to happen. I don't know what it is. And I kind of like that as a film. And to circle back to slashers are the ones that really introduced the other kind of scare, which is what they actually call a gag. So in the industry, behind the scenes information, they refer to it as a gag because it literally is. It's a got a punchline. The scare is a punchline. It's a jump scare. And when they're done well, they're very good. And when they're overdone, they're terrible.
What's a slasher film that's had a proper scare for you that's really due to jump scare type stuff?
I'm trying to think, really. When you talk about sequels, like there's very few because you're there for they're not there for jump scares. You're there for the gore. I'm trying to think.
Sorry, I've asked you a question.
No. It's an interesting one because they do sort of have that. The jump scares are the thing. I think the first Nightmare on Elm Street's got a couple.
Yeah.
That when I was even now I watch.
Yeah.
And you're like, oof, that one got me.
Yeah, even if you know it's coming, I find so Nightmare on Elm Street was in my head of sort of one of the more original ones that has jump scares. I've watched Nightmare on Elm Street all the time. I used to watch it every single year at Halloween, and I still jump, and I feel like I know that film so well, but it's just so perfectly crafted that it just gets me every single time.
Yeah, I honestly think that's because it's got the darkness. It's got no camp in it. Like it's played straight. and it has a definite darkness to it. But there's a couple of scares in that, in some of the dream sequences, that are really legit, like, you know, creepy. As a kid, like, they proper scared me.
Ridiculous.
Even like, I'd even say sort of like, I mean, 2 is its own thing, and I think one day it's worth exploring, because I actually kind of like Nightmare on Elm Street 2. I think it's got some good kills in it. It's got some interesting concepts. It's obviously been accepted now as a queer film, which is great. I think it fully embraces that. 3 is probably the last one that has some legit scares. Beyond that, up to New Nightmare's got some interesting bits in. But 3 has got some good stuff in it.
3 is just terrifying.
Yeah.
I don't watch 3 that often because I find it genuinely unsettling.
I'm trying to think that there's a couple of bits in 3. Unsettling is another good one. Is that sort of, again, that tension of like who's going to die? And again, going back to sort of Halloween, the first Halloween has got that, you know, in spades, because obviously he's Michael Myers is the shape. He sits in the background, and one of the most iconic scenes of all time, for me at least, to say, is that picture of like Laurie Strode. She's sort of on the landing. You know, she's just been cut. She's sort of, and the white face comes out of the shadow. And it's like, you know, it's not a jump scare, but you are there going like, run, just fucking run. And that's the kind of thing that I think that is really cool and played really well. But that's very different to, like I say, A Nightmare on Elm Street, which really leans into that sort of like the gore and more like horrific scenes rather than scares. But one of the ones I think it's in 4. No, sorry, I think it's in 3. I remember myself. Is it's finally revealed like Freddy's conception, and they tell the story of his conception, of how he's the sort of the bastard son of 1,000 maniacs or 100 maniacs, and how the nun that was Laura Kruger was trapped in, you know, that horrible pit of an insane asylum, and then over the holidays, they're not even going to like blunt it, like, yeah, it was over the Christmas period, and she was repeatedly
Happy
raped.
Christmas.
Yeah. And it's that, again, like when you sort of find that information out, you're like, wow, like that's really damaging. So yeah, it's weird how sort of like, you know, I think, you know, they get panned for jump scares, and they are there definitely, but they're sort of like the least scares, aren't they? Jump scares.
Yeah. I mean, there's a well executed jump scare is great.
Yes.
You know, you jump and you laugh, and it's brilliant. You know, Paranormal Activity, although not slash films, amazing jump scares. But then there's people like my other half who hate jump scares. Like he doesn't watch horror until quite recently, because I'm like, there's a lot of new horror that's coming out. Watch it. There are some occasional jump scares, but you know, don't worry about it. It's not the sort of jump scares that you're thinking of. But I do feel, but so for him, I wouldn't necessarily show him Nightmare on Elm Street or Halloween or any of the Freddy films. Or I mean, I've never shown him the Chucky films, clearly, because people that I find them terrifying. Because he's not going to have any enjoyment in it. But I do feel like they originate, and not in a bad way, the tension and release horror. And I think other people do it in different, sometimes better, sometimes worse ways. You know, like we talked about Paranormal Activity and sort of like Insidious and stuff like that. They have jump scares, but they're quite different. I think, but nothing beats a good slasher movie jump scare done well. Like nothing beats it. It's great. You feel you're so in the moment, even when you know it's coming. You're so in the moment. You get that laugh afterwards, you know, and you sit there and you go, oh, you fucking idiot, you knew that was coming, and it still made you jump. And I think that's what makes so many of the original slasher films, and then some of the newer ones, you know, like Scream, like one I'm going to talk about, which is You're Next, and stuff like that. That's what makes them good, because that pure essence of that excellent jump scare that's not there just, I mean, it is there to make you jump, but it's not there just to make you jump.
No, do you know what? One of the ones I think the way you've described it there has reminded me of one that worked for me. The first time I ever saw Scream, the opening of Scream, and you're opening with Drew Barrymore, who in 97, when that's first came, well, you know, I think we were at 97 when Scream came out.
Yeah.
She was less of a thing. I think she'd, you know, she was sort of, she was a known commodity, but she wasn't like a superstar. I think she sort of came back after that, really. She had Charlie's Angels and so on and so forth. But that opening of like the phone call and everything, and you're like, right, it is tense, it's creepy. And then the jump of when Ghostface first appears, and you presented with that, because again, it's frenetic, like it just starts and he just chases her down. That first chase proper made me jump. I remember seeing it for the first time, and it being like that thing of like, you know, it goes from like, you know, I want to play a game, which is more Saw, but like, you know, asking the question straight to, I'm going to knife you, and then off it goes. And the way that builds up is really well done. And again, this is talking about for Nightmare on Elm Street. This is Wes Craven doing what he does really well. And that opening, you could take that opening of Scream as a short film.
Yeah,
and be
absolutely.
Like, this is based on different types of scare. This is how it works. Like you could just, I'm sure, I bet you there's an essay out there somewhere that just looks at that opening section, that cold open of Scream. And that's got a great jump scare in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But then I think that's it, really, sort of different types of scares. But so no Chucky, all right. So let's remove Chucky from the board. There's no Chucky.
Sorry,
no, that's fine. I'm quite comfortable with that. I do love Chucky. I'm going to rewatch that before Halloween as well, because I'm doing it for the patrons. But we'll get into your favorite slasher films. But are there any other sort of like the odd ones, obscure ones, where you're like, oh, this one's great. It's like one-off, like this weird one, or are there any sort of like odder ones that you think I've never really watched the sequels, or I caught this one, or
I don't really know. I guess to talk about that, I think it's interesting to think about what you consider a slasher film. So for me, I think it's probably, what would I consider a slasher film? So all of the victims are human.
Mm-hmm.
The villain, it's not an alien, it's not a monster, so technically human, even though sometimes they're supernatural, or for some reason indestructible. I think a slash film has to have a high body count, right? Otherwise it's not a slash film. So when we were talking about it, I was thinking, what would I put in to I've done like a top 5 slash films. And I was thinking, is The Strangers with Liv Tyler a slash film? I mean, sort of, but is it really? No, because only 3 people die in it, right?
It's a home invasion horror, isn't it?
Right.
Really?
So I think that's really so that comes into count. And then, so great point. You say home invasion is a home invasion film. Home invasion film isn't automatically a slasher film, because you said what's sort of like a one-off, and I thought of Hush, the Mike Flanagan film.
Yeah,
is that actually a slasher film?
Yeah. It's like there's definitely like a scale, isn't there? Like a diagram. Like these at the core, these are like the true slasher films, as you say. Like there's definite sort of criteria, sort of like probably young human victims. Human but potentially supernatural killer. Isolated is definitely a factor.
Yes, that's great factor. Yeah.
In the sense of, when I say isolated, I don't mean alone, but they are in a fixed location. So it's going to be on a summer camp, or a street, or it's going to be in a building.
Yeah, it's always like small towns.
Yeah, it's like, it's almost like this location exists and the outside world doesn't. That's what they can't go outside of this, which is one of the other reasons I find that slashers struggle today, is because of mobile technology.
Yeah,
where you
absolutely.
Go, in the days they didn't have that. Now they were just like bang bang, yeah, we want an Uber because this place is fucked up, we're leaving. And I think that, yeah, high body count or a very specific kind of body. Inventive kills, I think, becomes a part of it. Like the kills become a part of it. And like I say, then as you sort of move out to the outer sides, like you'll get ones that hit a couple of those and whatever. Like you say, I think say like The Strangers and Hush, Martyrs, those ones get, you know, those sort of ones that go. It's a home invasion, but it's still got that slasher mentality. Or
so is The Purge a slasher film?
Yeah, it hits some of the rules, but, you know, and again, one of the things I'm curious about is I was thinking about this today. Is one of the requirements that the killer has a personal vendetta?
Oh, that's a great question. Is it a personal vendetta or like something that's wronged them in the past? Maybe because Freddy, you know, something wronged in the past.
They have to have a motivation that links that motivates them. Like Chucky's looking for a new body. You know, he literally has a ticking clock to get into a new body. Freddy was wronged. He was killed off by the parents of Elm Street. Michael is looking to kill off his family. Apparently, that's all a bit nebulous.
For some
Jason is you know, believes that anyone that is on the campsite, he's avenging his own death.
Yeah.
You know, and his mother's death at that point.
Scream. It's avenging his mother's.
They always have a personal motivation.
Yeah.
So as you go through them, even like the weird ones, you know, like, I don't know if you've ever seen Silent Night, Deadly Night.
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, yeah, I recommend. They get weird, but the first one, I'll describe it for you in a bit. But Silent Night, Deadly Night, like the one on the train, I think it's called Terror Train, possibly something else with Jamie Lee Curtis. Prom Night, Sleepaway Camp.
Yes,
all those, they've all got this sort of like, when it's revealed why the killer's doing what they're doing, it's again Valentine, Urban Legends. When you know, I Know What You Did Last Summer. They've all got a motivation as to why they're killing. I think that's an important part of it. I mean, I'll throw in Final Destination. Is that a slasher film? Is Death a slasher film?
Oh, I mean, I like that. I was going to say no, but I love the idea that Death is just like, I am going to bring some shit down onto you guys.
Yeah.
Just be like, maybe Death's been watching some slasher films and has gone, this looks really fun.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
With the boring way I have to collect people.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this into my own hands. I like that. I'm
going to let a small group live, and then I'm going to pluck them off one by one, just for something to do.
Oh, I like that. That's so bored.
Yeah,
it's like, oh god.
I can imagine like a darker version of like Terry Pratchett's Death from the Ring, like from those novels. It'd be just like, well, I could do it this way. Yeah, there's definitely like a key set of rules, you know, as Screamcast would say, to what makes a slasher film. And as you say, you work out from there. So
would The Hills Have Eyes be a slasher film?
I think you could include it for many reasons.
But it's not. Because they're like mutants, which is a horrible thing to say, but you know, it's a group of killers. It's not a lone killer.
Yeah. Well, this gets to one of my interesting points, is because everyone talks about slashers, and there's a character we haven't talked about, and that's Leatherface. Leatherface gets lumped in as a slasher, but they're not really. That first one in particular isn't a slasher film. Or is it? You know what I mean? It's sort of like, it's because again, the body count's kind of high, but it's sort of, it's a group of you know, hillbillies, or you know, Appalachian sort of hicks. And again, he's been dropped into later on. Leatherface has been dropped into slasher territory. But yeah, that's what I mean. Like, you know, you could probably take each film and start to say, here's the pure, as you say, let's not say pure, the form and its most crystallized, you know, version is in there. And then beyond that, it sort of spreads out to become other kinds of films. Because you get all kinds of things, like, you know, like I'm trying to think of they get the really crappy ones, like Microwave Massacre and what do you call it, not so sleepaway camp, but there's a it's Sleepover Massacre and all these other. There's just the 80s had a dirge of them, didn't they?
Oh, the 80s were the worst for them. But that's
yeah.
not true. There were a couple of good things. Was Black Christmas in the 80s?
70s. That's pre.
That's 70s.
That's pre-Halloween.
Is it? It's Black Christmas pre-Halloween.
Yeah, Black Christmas is 76.
Oh, I love Black Christmas.
Yeah, and so actually, weirdly, everyone sort of cites the POV shot at the start of Halloween as being like, oh, it's the first time it's used for a killer shot. No, Black Christmas did it first. Black Christmas did it first, and Black Christmas did the phone call thing before Scream.
Yes,
so,
yeah.
Yeah, that's an odd film. That is Black Christmas. But yeah, I don't know. Slasher films, there's definitely a crystallized version at the center, and then you come out from there to be these other things. But yeah, but I think they have to. Do you think it's time for them to come back though?
I think they could come back in a nice, fresh way.
Yeah,
I think there's no reason why that can't happen. I think there are certainly ways that you could make them more modern. I've not seen, so I consider the original Candyman a slasher film. I'm not sure it fits in, but I'm saying it does. And I've not seen the this year's version, the modern version. But I think, and I know for some people it doesn't hold up, but I do think there are ways in which we can tell similar stories, maybe not as remakes or as sequels, that involve the slasher tropes. But I do think it's much harder with technology. There needs to be reasons why technology isn't available, like in Hush. I think because I don't think you can do the Scream thing with it either, because I think technology still renders that, the all-knowing, sort of all, they're all-knowing in Scream, but I think technology still makes it impossible for the killer to be able to do anything. The only way you can do it is getting people isolated, right? So get them out into the cabin or anything like that, or sort of, I would imagine a woman stuck in a big house that's old. All of those sort of things. I think there could be some more interesting, inventive ways to it. Clearly, I'm not going to be able to be the person who writes them, because that was terrible and rambling. But I think there's elements in there that shouldn't be lost. So yes, I think there's elements in slasher storytelling that's just really, really good storytelling. And I think that can continue, as with all stories, they all tend to have the same nub of things. And I think that can carry on. I don't think it should go the later Halloween film ways of the characters are strong and uses guns and stuff, because I hate guns in slasher films. I agree. And they immediately take me out of it. It's not the point, because you can't stalk someone with a gun. No. You can't do creepy things with a gun. You just point it at them and shoot them. It takes away any of the scare, any of the tension.
The intimacy. So, it takes away it has to be intimate. That's the part of the point. And that's one of the reasons I think, Jason has his machete, which sort of it's about as big as you can get. But with Michael and the kitchen knife, there's an intimacy to that is more terrifying, because everything has to be close quarters. Which is why I think I do find some of the killings in sort of they are quite brutal, because then he's within inches of the people whenever he kills them, which makes it scarier for me. It's like you say, it's not someone with a rifle being picked off from yards and yards away. This is in your face. Final thought then, before we sort of wrap up, there was one other thing. Yes. I was just thinking in my head. We talked about the origins before, and we talked about the sort of we talked about the 1960s. We talked about Psycho and Peeping Tom. But then we also talked about the different types of slasher. We talked about the mystery slasher. I was talking about Friday the 13th, Sleepaway Camp, Scream, those kinds of ones, where you don't know who the killer is, and you see people getting killed off one by one. And all of a sudden, I was just playing this through my head, and I was thinking, have you ever heard of the book by Agatha Christie called? I'm not going to use its original title, but 10. It was called 10 Little Soldiers, and then there were none.
No.
Okay, so this book, written by Agatha Christie in the 30s.
Yeah.
I believe in the 30s, yes. And it's basically, it was made into a TV show not too long ago. But a group of people are invited to a large manor house
Mm.
on an island for a dinner party, and then none of them know each other, and throughout the evening they all start getting killed off. And it's not like a Miss Marple or a Poirot; it's a separate sort of thing. But yeah, that there's someone they're having to figure out who the killer is, and they're getting killed off one by one. So it plays out as a mystery. It's part of the sort of the great era of mystery fiction. But really, it's a staple for.
Yeah, it sounds really slasher.
Yeah, like it doesn't relish in the gore. Like, you don't, the book doesn't give you the sort of like, and then he plunged the knife in multiple times while grinning or anything like that. It's they find the body, so Colonel Mustard disappeared and then they find the body. So it's more about the mystery, but the setup is there from like as a real precursor. And so I'd be interested. So it does have an origin in mystery fiction as well.
And the mystery, helps make slasher films more fun. So, because you can have the gore of what was that Eli Roth film from ages ago that was really
Hostel.
gory? Hostel, right? So you can have the gore of Hostel, right? So Hostel's trying to be a slasher but also be really gory, and it doesn't work because there are killers as such. So you can go and have all that gore and sort of try and fit into the slasher genre. And for me, slasher, you need to have the gore, but you do need to have that mystery as well, because otherwise it doesn't, for me, there's no tension in Hostel or anything like that. And I think maybe that's the most classic trope of the slasher film, that it is that tension and release, tension and release, tension and release, with a lone killer and a final girl. Maybe that's it. Maybe I've defined the genre.
You have. There we go. And so on that note, we will start to round up then. So, and that's a fantastic discussion. I've enjoyed that discussion. It's been amazing. So one of the final things, as we've always said, is for these kinds of things, what are your 5 then? If you're either your favorite 5 or your top 5, or what are your 5 for slasher films?
So my 5 slasher films, in no particular order. I think I've mentioned them all, so none of them are going to be a surprise. Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream. Yeah, because I just think Scream in general, I could just sit and talk about Scream for hours. Yeah. It's just such an amazing film. And other people have done that, and they'd be much better than I am. Candyman, which I still think is terrifying, is still like one of the most atmospheric films that's ever been made. Absolutely love that film. So good. And then You're Next, which I definitely think is a slasher. I think it teeters on Home Invasion. Yes. But I actually think it's a slasher. And then with a nice little shout out to Happy Death Day, which is a film that completely blew me away. We just randomly put on, thinking it'd be really fun, just like on a random Saturday night, and it is so freaking good. That's a great film. That is absolutely fantastic, and a good shout for that one as well. That deserves a mention. No, I agree. I think if you didn't mention it, you can't not mention Halloween. It's such a good film. It stands up even like 40 years later. Stands up. It's so well made. It's also simple, so simplistic, so simple, so basic. And I think that works because it rests on that tension. I will give a shout out though. If you're a lot younger than us, that's going to sound really bad actually. If you are younger than us, if you are more used to a different pace, you have to remember that this is filmed in 1978. So you have to accept that the first sort of like 40 minutes or so is tension building and character building. Like, just go with it. So I'll call that out. For me, I'm going to mention for Nightmare on Elm Street, but I am going to say Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Just because I love that film so much. Dream Warriors is sort of, it's up there as a perfect sort of, they're encapsulated in the hospital. It's a great, so terrifying. But the group of kids are so good. They're so charismatic. Even Patricia Arquette sort of, is quite good in that. It's Freddy at his best. It's the moment that Freddy switches from being really embracing the camp, when he grabs one of the killers, smashing them into a TV and says,
welcome to prime time, bitch. And at that's the point, everything changes. I will throw out a Child's Play film. I think Child's Play 2 actually is I think slightly better as a slasher film than 1.
Wow.
Mainly because it leans into the camp. It has a better Chucky. It leans into the silliness. It knows what it is, and the ending of that film is immense. So I love that. I'm sort of sticking to the biggies, which I feel sort of a bit bad doing.
But there's a reason why they are that, though, because they are so good.
That's very, very true. Yeah, you are very true. I think Friday the 13th one, again, before you get it's the one mystery one I really like. It hasn't got Jason in. I get it hasn't got Jason, so I was just spoiling it for anyone, but it hasn't got Jason. But it works really well because it's so gritty and sort of, it's again that encapsulation of it all. And any more Scream again is just a milestone of horror cinema. Like it changed the way things go. I think you can't ignore it. And if I was going to introduce that to people, to slasher films, like it's up there. You can't not watch Scream. It's like, this is where things changed for the 90s. Unfortunately, for good and bad, it introduced all the terrible ones that came after it. But that's another thing, But I will leave you with one, and I will recommend this thing because Halloween also did. Not only did Halloween introduce slasher films, it introduced us to the holiday slasher film. So you get New Year's Evil, and obviously Valentine is related to. You could do a year. I don't know if there's an Easter one. That's probably a bit different, but
There's got to be an Easter one. There's got to be. I am Googling that after this.
If there isn't, I'm writing one.
Yeah.
However, there is a franchise. It's got 5 films in it, and it's called Silent Night, Deadly Night. And I haven't really watched all of them, but the first one is a Christmas-based slasher film. And it's based around a small boy. When he's very, very little, he's driving. He goes to see his grandfather at a nursing home with his mother. And the grandfather's like horrible to him, which has got nothing to do with the plot, but it makes him upset. Driving home, the car crashes, and a drugged up man dressed as Santa, and please forgive me for this, but this is actually what's in the film, rapes and kills his mum in front of him. And it's bizarrely graphic in this film. Anyway, this boy then goes into sort of care, and then when he's older, he's released from care, and he goes to work in a toy shop on Christmas. And I forget what it is now, but something sets him off. Oh, he's made to dress as Santa. That's right. He's made to dress up as the store Santa, and it triggers him. And then basically he goes off on a killing spree dressed as Santa, killing people if he deems them naughty. And when he kills them, he says whether they are naughty or nice. It's brilliant. It's madness. It's an absolute mad film. It's actually it's worth watching just for how mad it is.
Is it proper just flip and you're just like, what is happening? This film's lost its mind.
It's one of these weird films where like they clearly can't decide what the tone is.
Yeah.
So like when you get the whole sort of it's very 80s. I think it's 83, 84. When you get the attack on his mother, you're like, Jesus Christ, this is really graphic. This is really horrible. And so you're like, oh my God, this is going to be some hard hitting, like proper horror film. And then you sort of realize, oh no, it's not. It's really not. I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's seriously worth watching just for the guy who plays it. Now, and the series is a series of 4 or 5 films, and each film's a different killer, but they're all Christmas themed. I haven't seen it, but that first one, I recommend it to you. Just you can pick it up pretty cheap. Watch it at Christmas. It's an absolute hoot. It's mental.
Watch it at Christmas. I love it.
It ends in a Catholic nunnery. That's where the film ends. Like the climax.
Of course.
I can't even remember why, but that's what I remember.
Okay, it's on the watch list. I might not bring it out for family Christmas.
Come on, family, gather around. No Muppets Christmas Carol this year. We're watching Silent Night, Deadly Night.
It's been recommended by Scott.
Yeah. No, it is a good one. It's an odd one. But ladies and gentlemen, anyway, we shall finish there. So really, this has been an absolute like Who. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And thank you for coming on. But you know, this is me doing me. Let's talk about you. Where can people find you, and what have you got to promote?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was so fun. I feel weird because this is us actually meeting.
It is
strange, yeah. But I just feel like I know you, so that's really weird. So thank you. I've had so much fun talking about it. I could talk about it forever, but I will wrap it up. So where can people? So you can hear me in your ears with the Pop Gorillas. So that's at Pop Gorillas.
Yeah.
Wow, well done. That's really good. Where we review anything from pop culture in less time than it takes to listen to a song. If you're me, you use post-rock songs as a time limit for that, because you've got a lot to say. So it can be anything up to 5 to 8 minutes. My co-hosts are much better at it. You can hear me on Indie Comic Spotlight with the wonderful Tony, who is just amazing. So I've started doing that with him. So every month I'll be popping up there, and I love it. We did Pretty Deadly a few weeks ago, so check that out.
First 6, I've only read the first 6 issues, but that is a good book. That is.
What a book. It is amazing. And I'm going to be in the next few weeks launch. You can hear my beautiful tones on something called Femme ou Film. I went for the oo, where I will be talking about films that are either have female leads or been made by women that were, let's say, unfairly maligned either at the time that they came out, or you know, if it was a female director and then it wasn't successful, it was the fact that it was directed by a woman, that it was not, you know, society said it wasn't successful, so she never got to direct again. All of those sort of things, of deconstructing films that are for women, about women, by women, whether they are actually good or, in my opinion, they are all amazing and feminist classics. So that's going to be really good. The first one I'm going to be doing is with Tony, and it's going to be Josie and the Pussycats, and I've got a few amazing people lined up as well. So I think that's it. Oh, and you can see me on the socials, which is just my name because I'm very unimaginative, which is Ria Carrigan, which is RIACARROGAN. That's me.
Excellent. So ladies and gentlemen, go check those out. Exactly. You know, so I would say that, you know, Ria and I know each other through the Comics in Motion crew, which you mentioned Tony there, the old, the great Tony Farina, who's helped us on a number of things. But yes, go check out Pop Gorillas. I love Pop Gorillas.
Yeah,
it's a fantastic little sort of nugget of joy in my ears and every review. It's fantastic, and they are doing. At this point, I mean, when this comes out, they are doing a full review of the Halloween franchise leading up to Halloween Kills. So check it out before you go watch it. If you want to just that little sweet little nuggets before you go and check it out, this is the one for you. Go check it out. It's fantastic. There'll be links below as well for that. So I will be doing that. But ladies and gentlemen, if you like what we're doing on 20th Century Geek and you want to help us in 20th Century Towers, go and leave a review. Whatever your podcast catcher is, go leave us a review. 5 stars, 4 stars. I'm not that first, but it helps us get up in the rankings and all that kind of stuff. And if you really like what we do, come find us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/20CG Media. Got all kinds of bits and pieces on there. My brother from another mother, Julian Darius, and I are talking about the Twilight Zone. We're now all the way through the first season, ready for you guys to listen to it. I do 30-minute thoughts on some of the bits and pieces. It's fantastic content, so go and check it out. More of my dulcet tones and my wandering ramblings. It's fantastic. More like therapy. Just pay me to have therapy. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, and Ria, thank you very much for joining me on this show. It's been a fantastic conversation, and we shall talk again soon.